through code generation. So through code generation, it helps us generate, like, from this one authentication state, it can be the state of the application can be, let's say, of a certain provider, can be initial, loading. Let's say someone is, yeah, as the scenarios which you have pointed out, it can be loading. Let's say you are loading and then you want to tell the user like some message. Let's say we're checking if the username or password is correct, and then if the user has been logged in, you expect to have, when the user has been logged in, you expect to have an instance of a user. When the user has been logged out, you expect to extract nothing from it. And then when you have an error, you just have an error. So most of the time, when, or from what I experienced, when you have a provider, let's say when without using union types, let me just create a new, file, let's say, without, so let's say most of the time, let's just create a class and then we'll call it old. So let's say if we wanted, let's say we have an authentication provider, without using freeze, we'll have to check whether, let's say we have a message, when it's initial, we'll have a message. Let's say that message will be, let's say, nullable, and then if it will be nullable, and then it will be like loading message, like that. And then we'll have, let's say, an nullable instance of a user, because maybe the user could be logged out. And then let's say when we have an error when processing that, we'll have to have, let's say, a Boolean field, which will also be nullable. Let's say error. Let's say an error happened, and then if, let's say, the user has been logged in, this user here the instance of this user will not be null most of the time. So that's if the user has been authenticated. And then let's say we'll also have another Boolean value to keep track of whether the user has been authenticated or not. I don't know how many of you handle I don't know if there's a cleaner way of handling all of these variables together, but because you see, most of the time in your, let's say, in your build method, when you're reading the state of this auth provider, you'll have, let's say, you'll have to check if the user has been authenticated. And then if the user has been authenticated, you'll have to ensure that the user, you'll be sure that the user is not, the value of this user is not null. So what freeze actually does for us is, because, okay, maybe we can try and replicate, oh, sorry. We can try and replicate, let's say, this method. Let's just copy these two. Yeah, because let's say we have an authentication. Let me just. No, not this. So uh, let's say this, or maybe the at before we start the application, the value of the the user of course will be authenticated before we check the state of the authentication. So you see, without freeze, most of the time, uh, most of the time, you're gonna have to check for like a number of variables to see, because there can be a number of states. You see, I don't know if everyone is, I don't know if people are following what I'm trying to mean here, because you can have the at any current state, you can have when you're trying to authenticate a user, you can have, let's say, a loading message saying if we're checking the username and the password, and then once the username and the password has been loaded, you need to have an instance of a user. But if the user is not authenticated, the user value will be null. And then let's say if some error happened, let's say like a HTTP error, or there is no internet connection, or maybe the package you're using does not, like it cannot fetch the value of the user from that user's device. Let's say shared preferences is not working well. So you're gonna have to handle very many scenarios using these various states. But now when we use freezed here, when we use freezed, so with one state, so let me go to this other. So you see, with freezed, with one state, this authentication state, this value here. So with this authentication state here, this value can represent the initials. This value can either be initial, it can either be loading. And when it's loading, you are sure that you're gonna have like one message. You're gonna have a message. You don't expect to have an instance of, let's say, a user, or let's say an error. When the state is an error, you're gonna have a state of an error. So let me just take you through an example here. So let's say you're trying to authenticate a user, or let's say you're trying to when you're checking the state of the authentication. Let's go with this because I think it's a bit simpler. So when you just say the authentication state here, this authentication state is, you can have it as initial. This variable here, authentication state, you can have it as loading. So let's say you are checking the state of authentication, and then you just call notify listeners as normal. And then now you just, so when you say this state will be authentication loading, you also notice that, let's say you just come and now using your authentication, let's say provider, you try and check if the user on, let's say on shared preferences, because this one I'm using shared preferences on this instance. So when you're checking a user, when you, let's say, get a user, if if the user is null, you just return null. And then if the user is not null, you just you say user from JSON. You'll get either a user, the user is null, or the user is not null. Okay, so if the user is null, the authentication state will be logged out, because the shared preferences value doesn't have any data. But if we get an instance of a user, since the return value is a nullable, is a nullable, so it's either user will be either null or not null. So if you see now here, this authentication state which we have here can either be can either be logged out or logged in, but you don't have to compare to this other value here. You see, now we don't have to keep track of either if the user is loading, the user has, let's say, user, and then the error, if let's say there's an error. So I think the beauty of this comes when now we go to the build method. So let me close all of this. And then, so when you come now, let's say, to the build method, you just, for this example, we just we need an instance of an authentication provider. And then we just provide it to the widget tree here. So we're just creating an instance of a change notifier provider so that other widgets down the tree can read it. So here we're just reading on the home page now. Let's say the home page is where the main application will be. So we're just reading the state of the authentication state. So when the authentication state is initial, now here what happens here is, now when the authentication state, let's say when freeze generates the data classes, it gives us an instance of two methods or more. So what we can do is, you see, when you map, you get an instance. I don't know how I can explain this, but it gives you like a functional way of mapping. So when let's say the state, you see, let me just open this separately here. So you see the authentication state which we have here, this class, this object, the state of it can either be initial, it can either be loading, and then it can either be logged in. And then when it's loading, you have a message. When it's logged in, you get an instance of a user. When it's logged out, there is no value which you expect from, let's say, that provider. When there's an error, you expect to have an instance of some error. So when in our outstate provider here, we have this instance of an authentication state, which is just this private variable which you are exposing. So when we come now to the main method and we read the state of the authentication state. So it can either be initial, loading, logged in, or logged out, or let's say an error happens. So when it's initial, let's say you can just show like a message to the user, or let's say some like a splash screen introducing your user to the application, like you just like a splash screen showing what your app is about. And then when it's loading, let's say you can show this loading view. So for the loading view, we just have like an indicator, but the important thing from here is we have an instance of this, like this message, the string message which we created here. So you see the string, which is a message, we get access to that variable, and then we can pass that variable, we can map the state of loading to, let's say, a loading view, or whichever widget you want to call it. Let's say you have a loading widget, and then when it's logged in, you have, let's say, a home. You take the user to the home page of where your application, what your application really does. And then if the user is logged out, you show them the login widget. So you see, when the user is logged out, this to the same case as this, the user doesn't access any. When the user is logged out, let's say you don't want to show any message to the user, so you don't expect your provider to give you any data. And then if, let's say, an error happens when you're trying to authenticate, or when you're checking the authentication state, you'll just have to show the user the error message or like an error widget. So here, what we are doing is we are mapping the authentication state to some widget. So when you see even the, I think the method is even called properly. So when the authentication state is initial, what widget should we show to the user? When the authentication state is loading, what message should we show to the user? When the authentication state is logged in, our provider will give us access to the user. And then when the authentication set is logged out, we'll show the user a login widget. And then when the authentication set is an error, we'll show the user, let's say like you give the user like a retry button, or even if there is an error, what you can do even here is you don't have to show the error. You can even use like, you can just map it to the login widget, and then whichever state you wanna, let's say if an error happens, you just want to ignore it and you just want to show the user the login widget anyway, you'll just have to show it. You can show it here. Yeah, so I don't want to like talk too much. I want to make the session interactive as much as I didn't prepare, so I just want to welcome some. I don't know if everyone is following or I'm just talking to myself. So I just wanted, I want to hear some questions, and then from the participants who are here, and then we see how we can make, if there's anyone who has a question at this point, I can try to answer that question.
Anyone with the question can just post it on the chat. Maybe if you don't want to speak, yeah, but I'll encourage you to ask by voice.
Okay, if there's no one who has a question, is there anyone following, or do you see a use case where you can use this?
For me, I see. Okay, and then go first.
Okay, definitely there are situations that you need to do this. For example, if you use block, the default examples use a method where there is a base class for the different states, and then all the other states, like basically you have a class for each state, a separate class for handling error state, and a separate class for handling loading, initial, and so on. So you have multiple classes to deal with, and that's a lot of code to write. And most of them, like for example, the loading state doesn't have really anything. It's just that a class that will notify you when something is basically loading. So instead of managing, and there also you don't have a lot of, apart from, I think the best way you can manage if you're using multiple classes is to use maybe something like Equatable to make sure that the objects of the different classes, or basically if a class changes, you can be able to detect the change. But with this method, you have only one class to deal with, and you can use it to manage the different states. So basically, this is better because I've actually tried using it. This method can be used obviously with any state management tool. That block was just an example, but I've used this with block, and it makes things a bit easy. You don't have, as you can see, the code he has written is not a lot. Most of it is handled by Freeze. You have all the code generation bits, so you don't have to write a lot of boilerplates to solve your problem, at least. So I think, yeah, this is a good method. Another method is to make your own class that will have the different states. which obviously you have to use something like equatable to make sure that the changes are being detected, but you'll have a lot of if statements to check if this is basically if loading is true, then hide this. If this is true, then hide the other one. But with union types, managing the different states of the class of the same class is very easy. I think that's all I have.
Yeah. So actually I like because what I used to love provider, but also on the other side, block used to have a lot of boilerplate. And then let's say you have to implement the equatable, like the equatable properties. Yeah, I don't know if you remember. For most of the people who use block. So, and let's say your product manager comes on and says, we need to have, let's say, we need to implement another state, or we need to display some screen to the user. Let's say when the user, let's say there is no internet connection during authentication. Let's say we just have, let's say, no internet connection. So this will be like another state which you'll have to implement. What phrase will help us in, we can just say, let's say, no internet connection. For that, and then once we regenerate our classes, the compiler will actually give us an error because we haven't implemented the state where the no internet connection. We haven't implemented this no internet connection, the state. So when there is no internet connection here, the compiler will complain and the code will not run. So it helps us be aware of the new changes which have been made to the code. And then, as Danvik has said, it can be implemented with any other, even if you use Mobex, if you use Block, if you use it doesn't depend on the state management. The compiler will have to notify you, because most of the time, what I've realized on the state management is most of the time it's, let's say, adding like events to the provider. If it's, let's say, logging in, you have to log in with that's another state. Even if you use provider, like in our case here, we have to authenticate a user here. So you see, you have an email and a password. In Block, you'll be adding an event which contains an email and a password. So you see, the code will not compile until we have implemented this no internet connection state. So I think it helps us also. It reduces the number of errors which you can experience, let's say, during production, or even when you're working as a team. You've added like a new state, so the user will have to implement the person you're working with have to implement will have to implement the state of this new application, this new variable here. Yeah. So yeah, I think I don't know. I think I'd love more questions, because I'm sorry I never prepared my presentation well. So, but the way I'm seeing it is, I think questions can make this session more interactive. Yeah, because if I go to another example, I haven't implemented the view, but yeah, and I'm seeing 18 minutes is a lot of time. Is not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time. Sorry. So any other person who has a question, we can try and make this session interactive. Yeah, some had a question.
No, I think you had asked if anyone has maybe seen a use case that will be helpful, but I think Danvik said what I was going to say.
Okay. So if there's no other person who has a question, maybe we can take the 17 minutes and then we look into another use case. Yeah, so let's say you've been we have let's say we want to make a page where, like a widget where the user can get a joke. Yeah, and for this instance, I'll be using like the Chuck Norris. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Chuck Norris jokes. There's an API where you can get like Chuck Norris jokes. So the joke contains the ID. This is nullable, and then we have the joke. The icon I don't think even will be important. So, but at any moment when let's say we are fetching a joke from an API, or let's say we're loading some data from the API, at some point let's say before the widget renders, the state will be initial, and then at some point it will be loading, and then once we have got the joke, the state of the joke will be, let's say, loaded. And if, let's say, there's an error, same, it will just have an error and, let's say, a stack trace if you are interested in the stack trace. So in our case here now, what we can do is, you see, let's say someone calls this method load joke. The joke state will be loading, fetching the new door, and then you notify your listeners as normal. And then this is another union type. The result here, it's a union type whether it can load with, if it succeeds, it will give us a data type of type T. So in our state, it will be joke. It will be a joke, and then it will be okay. So this is how you define your union. This is how you normally create your union types. If you just say constant factory, and then you say dot okay, or let's say dot fail, or dot whatever you want to call it. And then, so that's how the API is. And then you're just calling this API. We're calling then the get. If the response is 200, we just pass the joke, and then we return. And so this method can either return an error or a success. When it returns, if it gets the joke correctly, it will return an instance of a joke here. If it fails, we just return the instance of the status message, as we have seen here. So yeah, so we can try and implement this. I don't know if it will work. Yeah, but we can try and implement this. Let's say the joke view. I'll just call it here. And then, yeah, let's just go with this. And then, so what we are doing here, we have this provider here. We say load joke. And then, yeah, so what we'll do here is, since the union type the result is a union type, we come and say, which is a union type, which will either return, you see here, it will return a result of an instance of a joke. Yeah. Let me just import this. And then, so you remember this union type here. So it can either return a joke. Yeah, it can either return a joke or a fail. You see here, it can either be okay, with a joke or a fail. So we can say when the joke result is okay, it will return an instance of a joke. And that is an object of type joke, you see here. So when it's an instance of a type joke, we can say the joke state equals to joke state dot loaded, and then we get an instance of this joke. And then when it fails with an error, just say joke state dot error. So we just have to map this, and then should have ignored this, but we can say empty. Yeah. So see now when you can just have, we have to say joke state equals to joke state dot error. So, and then we notify listeners. Yeah, so here in our view now, what we can do is we can say we just, since here we've called an app bar, and the body here is a joke view. So we can now, we have to like return a widget, since we are reading the state of our joke. So we can say return. So the jokes, when the joke state is initial, what shall we do? Yeah, what shall we do? Let's say we can just say, we can give a user there like a center widget, and then say child icon button, or an icon button, let's say, and then so we say, yeah, I think it could be better if we could say joke provider. So yeah, so since we are reading the state of this provider here, this state, so what we can do is we can just say that, and then if we just say icon, we can say icon dot, let's say, download or something. Or we just put that, since we don't have time. If let's say the state is loading, we can have a circular progress indicator. So, but now you see, since this is loading, we expect to have an instance of a message. Let's say the message is loading. So, and then when the joke has been loaded, we get an instance of a joke. So what we can do is just render our joke, and then send, and then text, we say we can render the text, the child text. See, now we have a joke dot joke. That's the actual joke which we wanted. And then if we have an error, we can access the error, and then we just ignore the stack trace, and then we say, let's say a column, and then let's say we have an icon, icons dot error. Then yeah, so see, we here we are just, for each and every state we are returning some widget, but we are not using if statements. And that's something which I used to like about Freezed. And then here we can now say, we can have a text here which you can display the error to string to the user. And then let's say we have a retry button, icon button. I think I'm trying to race with time. I'm sorry for I didn't record this, but let's say we can create a method called retry here. Then we have an icon. Let's say icon. Yeah, let's say that. So what we can do in our job provider, we can now implement, let's say, a method called retry. Yeah. Then we can just now give a user a message. Let's say there's an error. Let's say now we want to tell the message user, yeah. Let's say an error happened. Trying to get a new joke. Let's just say that's the message you want to display to the users. And then we notify the listeners. And then we just now come and say, maybe another thing which you can take from this, when you let's say you map over the instance of a union type, you can get an instance of you can map it to any, you don't have to map it, let's say, to a widget. You can map it to a string, you can map it to an exception. So let's say for instance, we can, let's say the joke state, new state, we can say joke result dot when. So when no, joke result, sorry. Let's say when it's okay, or we have to access the instance of the joke. Now we say the status, we have successfully loaded our joke. Yeah. And then when it fails with an error, you can access this just the same way here. Now you see this new state, we can now say, you see now we have moved from the result of whether our joke was loaded from our API or not to a joke state. So if you decided to, so with this new joke state here, you will see we've mapped over this result here to this new result without using if statements. So you can now come and say, this joke state is equals to new state. And then you notify listeners for that. So I don't know if we can, I don't know if I have much time. Yeah, but let me switch to okay, yeah. So I don't know if I can add this here. So this is what we have now, and then I'm so sorry guys for I didn't make this, but what you can try and do is a job provider that get load job. So yeah, so for this now we can try and see here. So when we try this, I don't know, I never displayed, but yeah. Oh, okay. So I don't know why it happened like this, but yeah, let's see. I think it took a while to, oh, I didn't say loading. So, but when you do this, okay, I don't know what happened there, but yeah, yeah, I think the live presentation is not working, but I'm hoping you learned a thing of, yeah, through this, because but I apologize. This is my first talk. I didn't prepare enough. Yeah, even though I was notified early enough, I didn't prepare enough to give this talk. But yeah, I hope you learned a thing or two about union types. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know why it's happening. Maybe I didn't provide this instance to the file provider.
Douglas, maybe you can share the code on GitHub so that anyone who is learning about the same topic can basically review the code, and I'm sure there's someone who will notice the error that
yeah,
I know you're under pressure to present, but usually when you are free, maybe you can find time and basically fix the problem, and then someone else who wants to learn about the topic can have a look at the code and learn a few things. So yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so thank you. This is my first presentation ever. I don't know how
it happens. It happens.
Yeah, and I didn't prepare enough, so I'm sorry, but I hope you learned a thing or two. And if you have what I was trying to show was how I think these union types can actually help so much in reducing the number of if statements and writing less code. And as you know, less code gives less bugs. So yeah, so yeah, I'll share the code on GitHub just the way it is, and then if anyone gets the problem, you can just let me know. Yeah, but my apologies for not preparing well on time. Okay.
So thanks, Douglas, for your presentation. I think it happens. The only thing I'd encourage you, maybe in your next session, maybe you could take some time to prepare well. It will actually lead you to reduce the chances of you panicking. Kind of. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we've come to the end of our session today. I have come to the end of our session today. So from the attendees, I think we have Sharon who joined us. So maybe Sharon can say hi just before we close off the meetup.
Hi everyone. So my name is Sharon. Sorry, I joined late. So I see you're finishing up, but it's good that you're getting to put this on GitHub, then I'll look at it. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. I don't know if Dan Vic has some final remarks.
Yeah, I don't think I have much. I think, thank you, Black, just to thank our speaker for the day, Beth Douglas, for sharing with us. For the next presentation, we really encourage everyone to be part of everyone in the community to at least give presentations. Presentations help you basically prepare, learn new things. Number one, do some research. For example, there are a few things that maybe he would have taken his time to, maybe if someone who is new to Freeze, he may have, if he had time to prepare, he may have prepared some kind of maybe presentation where like basically the introduction bit of Freeze and why you should use it. There are so many, it has so many advantages. It replaces so many other packages, for example, built value and so on. So if you prepare enough, I think it will help you in basically pitching your idea to maybe a client, pitching your idea to a VC, and to anyone who wants to basically hear of your idea. So it really helps for us to keep presenting. Encourage anyone to keep presenting. We will prepare a document that will help us at least know how to present, so that in case there's anyone who is presenting for the first time, they may just reference the document and know how to, so that you prepare enough and you have confidence. So I think that is all. Mine is to encourage anyone else who even hasn't presented before. Get in touch with us. Tell us that you haven't prepared before, or you haven't presented before. Let us guide you through and make sure that your presentation look good. So I think that is all. Sam?
Okay, thanks. That's Dan for your remarks. Okay. So thanks for that, Dan. I think there's a comment maybe in the chat by Otieno. A suggestion I could make is that he tries to do a full restart before the error disappears and you notice the error provider was not found, which occurs. Maybe Otieno, you can say something about that, about your remark.
Okay. We had the red screen of death. I think that's what it's called. Before it disappeared, there was a line that indicated provider not found. I used to find that error initially when I added provider path, but did not restart the app. So sometimes it could be very frustrating. You're aware that your code should work, but it's not working because you've changed the state heavily, and a simple restart will not load the changes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, that's clear. I think Douglas, you've had it.
So yeah, if we actually had more time and we had a way of, let's say, screen sharing with everyone so that we can, let's say, fix bugs together. Yeah, maybe we could, but yeah, I'll upload the code as it is, and then Otieno, and also I'll try and see what could have happened to the code.
Okay,
Yeah,
also
but,
make the repository private. Public.
I make it private. Oh, okay.
Public, yeah. Public, yeah. Yeah, okay, nice. Thanks everyone for joining. Let's meet on 27th. So on 27th, we'll be having Maureen Josephine, who is the first Flutter Google developer expert in Kenya. I don't know if she's the first in Africa. I think she is, but she'll be taking us through Flutter linting in Flutter. So just prepare for that. It's in 2 weeks on the 27th of this month, same time. Yeah. So yeah, I can't wait for the session. I hope you're also excited for that. So thanks for everyone for joining. I'll see you on 27th. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Bye. Everyone.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.